Good Wednesday evening to everybody out there. Meteorologist Hackville here with you. And, boy, what a difference in 24 hours makes in regards to absolutely nothing. I was hoping that I could come today and be like, hey, we can rule out an area. It's more than likely going to go in this area. Well, that's really not the case. If anything, today has complicated things more. We've seen more of a disagreement amongst the models, and that's just causing, meteorologists headaches. But it also is a time to tell you at home that you have to monitor these things continuously. You can't just sit down and say, hey, I'm going to look at the track. Oh, the track's going to Florida. I'm out of the cone. Okay, bye. That is not how these things work. Unfortunately, I wish everything was set in stone in regards to forecasting, tropical systems, but it's not. And it probably never will be. The science has come a long way, but we have a long ways to go, especially with intensity and also the track. But the cones have gotten smaller because the margin of error is less, but not every storm is the same. Some storms we have good agreement. Some storms we don't have very good agreement, and this is one of those storms. What will likely be future Nate is one of those storms that right now I cannot give you a very confident forecast of where this thing's eventually going to end up. Let's look at the satellite picture because you clearly see there's a spin down here. This is in the far southern Caribbean. This is the coast of Nicaragua right here. Honduras up here. This is the Yucatan. Most people know what the Yucatan is. That's what sticks out into the Gulf. So you can see the Gulf is way up here. It's sort of off the screen in this regard. So right now, the satellite shows a nice spin, but most of that I think is in the mid-levels. The hurricane hunters went down there today. They really did not find a very strong storm. There is a weak tropical depression down there, but this is not Nate yet, and it's probably not going to be Nate later tonight. Maybe sometime tomorrow it could be, but one thing I want to draw your attention to right now is this coastline, all of this landmass. That is a big factor in the final track of this thing. And also the coast of the Yucatan up here, Belize into the Yucatan up here, that all plays into the whole factoring into where this thing will eventually make landfall and how strong it will be. Let's get right to the point here. Here's the latest track from the National Hurricane Center. We talked about this yesterday, how, some models of Louisiana, some models of Florida. The European, Florida, okay? Florida Panhandle, that is. The European has been the best this hurricane season. We have no reason to believe that we should go against the European, but that doesn't mean the European is not going to mess up, because that can happen. That's why we have all of these models run, because the European might have done great with all the past storms, but this is a new storm. And sure enough, the European can easily be wrong. And it's eventually going to be wrong with the storm. Is it this one? Who knows? But this is the latest track from the National Hurricane Center. They scooted right along the coast of Nicaragua and Honduras and then across the Northwest Caribbean. Right here, no storm this year is really going over these waters in the Northwest Caribbean. So this could easily be a quickly strengthening storm once we get into Friday over the Northwest Caribbean. Then it's going to track into the Southern Gulf. Again, no storm has really traversed these waters, at least strong storm. Remember, Harvey developed around here, but it wasn't until the Western Gulf that it kind of got itself together. So really, the loop current right here, which comes out of the Caribbean, very warm water, okay? So easily this is going to be a strengthening storm, but one thing I just already told you about was land interaction. What if it's on the left side of this cone and it messes with the land? Then obviously it might be a much weaker system. Again, so many variables. That's what, these land masses, whenever we have a storm in this vicinity, it's hard. It's really hard to predict because land interaction does a few things. It can cause the center to jump around, which obviously, if the center jumps on us, then we're tracking the wrong area already. And also, it can mess with intensity, which does have an influence on track as well. Eventually, this thing gets into the Southern Gulf, and by noon or 2 p.m. Saturday, it's in the Central Gulf as a hurricane, and then it makes this turn to the north-northeast, okay? Today, models have shifted more west. I'm not going to lie. This morning, they jumped more so all over here. And then today they sort of spread out where they go. Some go to South Central Louisiana. Some make this hook like this. So you get the big picture. And I'm going to show you that big picture right here and show you the latest. This is the latest spaghetti plots. I know everybody loves spaghetti plots, and I've said it with the last storm with Irma. Sort of hate spaghetti plots because somebody commented earlier on one of my posts. The ones I looked at all earlier showed Florida. Now all of a sudden they show Louisiana. Well, you can plot a million spaghetti models on here. There's a million models that get thrown out with these storms, and depending on what you're trying to tell people, that's how you can use those spaghetti plots to your advantage. this is a general consensus of our best models with some bad models too. Don't get me wrong, there are some bad models on here, but I like this graphic because it gives you the best models. See this little orange one right here? That is the European, okay? You can see what it does. Takes it right into Panama City, okay? This big red dot right here, that is the National Hurricane Center track. They are following the European, and they have no reason not to because the European has been that good this year. And I'm sort of in agreement that I do believe this thing's going to continue this way and then turn towards the north-northeast. Somewhere, you know, if I had to follow along, I think from the Mississippi Gulf Coast to, you know, Apalachicola, Florida, that is where my best guess, my most, say, confident guess is right now. I'm putting out there it's a guess because there are some models that are going this direction. And depending on all of this land interaction down here, that can throw a wrench in the forecast and this thing can come farther west. That is why we're saying if you live in Louisiana to the Florida Panhandle, you need to continue to monitor this. This is not something that we have set in stone. If all of these models shift and was in very good agreement, then I could say, hey, Louisiana can write this storm off for the most part. Even though it'll be coming straight towards us, we have good agreement. We do not have good agreement among the models right now, and that is something that is going to avoid for me from saying that, hey, Louisiana rising, you're fine. If it does take this track, okay, and it does something like this, Louisiana will be fine. We will really see very little impacts. I said it yesterday, I said it today. The storm is going to be coming right at us. And then if it makes that hook, remember, all the worst for the weather is on the east side of these storms. It's on the east side and the center, where the center goes. If it misses just to your right or just to your east, wherever your location may be, whether you're in Mississippi, you know, Louisiana, if it misses to your east, the impacts are going to be minimal. We're talking very little in the way of weather, probably maybe a little bit of gusty winds, but that's about it. And when I say gusty winds, I'm only talking 20 to 30, and I'm not really talking rain-driven winds. You probably won't even see me much rain. It's where that center goes and just off to the east. That's what we're watching for, and that's why I'm saying there's a huge bust potential for Louisiana because storm tracking right towards you is going to get everybody nervous. And then all of a sudden, if it turns right, everybody's going to be like, hey, we didn't even see a cloud barely. You get my drift. That is the potential that could happen if it takes that turn and if it takes that sharp right track. Let's get into the meat of this. Let's talk about what is going to happen as far as in the upper levels. How are the steering currents going to play out? We're first going to use the GFS here. The GFS, I'm going to warn you in advance, the GFS takes this to Louisiana, okay? So what does that mean? Well, absolutely nothing in regards to the grand scheme of things because the GFS takes it to Louisiana, European takes it to the Florida Panhandle. As we go into your day, on your Thursday, we're going to jump quickly ahead. You see where the GFS has this thing. It's not moving very fast. It's a slow mover down here. It's over Nicaragua moving into the portions of Honduras. So it actually takes it over land. It's a big player in all of this because obviously it can't strengthen over land. Going to go a little bit farther ahead. Going into Friday afternoon, it's over the Caribbean, the Northwest Caribbean, and it's one of the more farther, say, western models. The center is right here, starting to strengthen. Like I said, if it's over water in the Northwest Caribbean, that's some of the warmest waters we have out there right now, so it is most likely going to strengthen. There's this little disturbance that's going to pass across the Gulf, not something that's going to probably develop, but it also factors into this, you know, and you can see I keep adding all of these factors, and you can see why the models are struggling with this. As it goes this way, a lot of times the storms are going to want to come up, draw northward, and then kind of follow it along the lines. And that's sort of what I think the GFS is trying to do. As we go into the weekend, getting into Saturday, notice how everything plays out. You're probably wondering, what are all these bright colors? This is high pressure. Remember, tropical systems cannot go into high pressure. They're not going to go running right into them. They're going to go around them. So you can see how the steering currents are like this around this ridge of high pressure. And then you see this little thing up here? That's a trough digging down. So that's a cold front. All right, so as we get into the weekend, here's the system right here. And obviously, if nothing changes, it's going to continue off and march off to the northwest. And that is what the GFS is doing. Notice how it follows that line. The high pressure stays put over Florida, so it can't turn into that. And that trough is just not strong enough to really bump the side of this high off to where it can turn this way. So it just rides right into Louisiana. Like I warned you before, the GFS takes it into Louisiana. The GFS has been jumping back and forth too. Sometimes it's going strong, sometimes it's going weak. That makes me believe, okay, the GFS might not have a good handle on what's happening. Jump to the European, because that's what everybody knows now, that the European has been nailing these storms one after another this year. But the European's not always right. And there's one of these storms that's going to be wrong with. We don't know if it's this one, but that's why we say you got to watch, you got to continue to monitor this at home. 24 hours. There's a system down there across the Southwest Caribbean. Notice as we go into 48 hours, this is Friday morning. The GFS was over here. The European is over here, okay? It's a big difference. Within 2 days, we're already seeing a huge drastic change. You know, that's a huge difference in just a 2-day forecast, how far apart they are, at least 100 miles apart. And at that point, then your end result's just going to get larger and larger apart from each other. So we're going to keep going along here. As we get into Saturday morning, it course sort of comes back. You notice how it was right here and then it bends back more northwesterly, very close to where the GFS has it on Saturday morning, even though the European's a little bit slower. And then watch how it does this once it gets in the Gulf. You saw where it went? It almost went due north, and then it just keeps going straight. Okay, so let's back up one and draw some things on here for you. The GFS is much weaker with this ridge of high pressure over Florida. It's still got the trough, which isn't that strong, but it's allowing the storm to get drawn north and turn. And because this ridge is not as strong as the GFS had. Also, it's labeling it at 978. That's a hurricane. Okay, and the European is much stronger than the GFS and has been, and it's almost, I mean, in the 960s, I think it was, when you look at the close resolution of the model. It's got a landfall around Panama City as a 960-something hurricane, which is getting borderline Cat 2, Cat 3. So what is the moral of the story of all of this? We don't know where this is going to make a final landfall. The National Hurricane Center has come out and said the confidence in this forecast is fairly low. We do not have good confidence because the models are still too spread out. And they say residents from Louisiana to Florida need to be prepared to take action. Just think about those small things that you could do right now. If it never comes, great. You kind of just prepared yourself for no good reason, you know. But right now, Louisiana residents to Florida residents and everybody in between, Mississippi and Alabama, you just need to be monitoring this constantly, watching the latest models that come out, and then make your decisions from there. Eventually, one of these models is going to give in. The GFS is either going to jump to the European solution or the European is going to jump to the GFS. At that point, I will then be able to say, okay, looks like it's going here. Like I mentioned before, if my gut instinct right now with everything I'm seeing, somewhere between, you know, say Mississippi Gulf Coast to Apalachicola, Florida. I still, even though the GFS comes to Louisiana, I still don't think it gets that far west, but that can easily change. It's just something we're going to have to watch over the coming days. But remember, this is only 2 to 3 days out. We're talking about Saturday night into Sunday, a landfall, maybe even as late as Monday, but I'm leaning more towards sometime Sunday. So we don't have a lot of time. That's why you need to monitor this closely, because eventually these models are going to give in. It's coming soon, but it hasn't happened yet, but we'll continue to monitor it. Again, I'm meteorologist Zach Frill. Hopefully this information helps kind of get you in the know of what's going on. And anybody, you know, that says, oh, I know what's going here, that's not true. We have way too much disagreement among the models right now to really say it's going here specifically. We just know the European is one of the best, and it's taking that turn more northeasterly towards the Florida Panhandle. Great news for Louisiana. Very little impact if that happens, but that is not set in stone yet, and we'll just have to continue to monitor it over the coming days. I'll be updating as we get more model runs. They come in a lot overnight and a lot during lunchtime during the day, so you'll kind of expect that information from me during those times. Everybody have a great night.